My name is Antonia Salzano. I am 54 years old, and I am the mother of Saint Carlo Acutis. I have spoken in public about my son more times than I can count. I have described his childhood, his faith, his programming projects, his love for animals, his daily mass, his diagnosis, his death. I have told the story of Carlo Acutis so many times, in so many languages, in so many cities, that there are moments when the telling has become almost separate from the living of it. A practiced shape, a known sequence of words that carries real weight, but that I can navigate without being destroyed by it every time. There is one conversation I have never practiced, one that I have never given a public shape to, one that I have carried for 18 years in the original, unpolished form in which it happened, not as a story I have told many times and refined through the telling, but as a memory that remains raw and specific and entirely its own, because I have protected it from the wear of repetition until today. What I am about to share with you happened on the afternoon of October 8th, 2006. Carlo had been hospitalized at the San Gerardo Hospital in Monza for 5 days. We knew his leukemia was irreversible. We knew he was dying. The word dying had moved from something we understood abstractly to something we understood in our bodies, in the particular quality of those hospital corridors, in the way the nurses spoke to us, in the specific angle of the afternoon light through the window of his room. Carlo called me to his bedside that afternoon, with a gentleness and a specificity that I recognized, even through my grief, as purposeful. He had something to deliver. He had been asked to deliver it, and he needed me to receive it carefully, because it was not for me alone. He told me what the soul experiences in the moment it understands it is about to leave the body, not what happens after death, not what waits on the other side. What happens in the interior life of a soul in the days, hours, and minutes before departure. The process of preparation, the quality of that experience, the specific texture of what it is like to be a human soul that is beginning to remember where it came from and recognize where it is going. He told me this with the calm of someone who was living it, because he was. I want you to understand something before I go further. My son was 15 years old. He had been diagnosed with leukemia less than a month before this conversation. He was on pain medication and in a hospital bed, and his body was doing what bodies do when they are being overtaken by disease. All of that is true, and also true, simultaneously, without contradiction, is that what he said to me that afternoon bore no relationship to the confused, medicated, frightened speech of a dying teenager. It was organized. It was precise. It was delivered with the characteristic attention to structure that anyone who knew Carlo would recognize immediately. The same quality of mind that built a database of Eucharistic miracles, that cataloged and cross-referenced and presented evidence with the disciplined care of someone who understood that the truth deserved to be communicated accurately. He was dying, and he was thinking about the people who would need to hear what he was learning. That was Carlo. That was always Carlo, even in his dying, perhaps most completely in his dying. He was thinking about the people who would need what he had been given. I have waited 18 years to be able to say what I am about to say. I waited because I wanted to say it properly. Not as grief speaking, not as a mother constructing comfort from the ruins of loss, but as an accurate witness to something that happened, and that has consequences for every person who has ever feared death, for every parent who has sat beside a dying child and searched for something to hold, for every person watching someone they love prepare to leave and not knowing whether what they are witnessing is suffering or something else entirely. It is something else entirely. Carlo told me so, and everything I have watched unfold in the 18 years since has confirmed it. Come with me. I want to tell you everything. Carlo Acutis was born on May 3rd, 1991, in London, where my husband Andrea and I were living at the time. We returned to Milan when he was very small, and Milan is where he grew up, where he became himself, where his faith deepened from the seed planted by his Polish nanny Beata into something that eventually took over the entire garden. I want to speak honestly about who I was when Carlo was young, because the contrast matters for what I am about to tell you. I was not, in the early years of his life, the woman of faith I later became. I believed. I had been raised Catholic. I had never formally rejected the Church. But my practice was thin and inconsistent, crowded out by the ordinary pressures and pleasures of a busy professional life. I was a mother who loved her son absolutely, and a Catholic who attended Mass on important occasions. The distance between those two modes of engagement with God would, in time, be eliminated. The elimination was primarily Carlo's work. He began pulling me toward faith very early, not through argument, not through the kind of earnest teenage proselytizing that might have provoked resistance, through simple, undramatic, completely authentic fidelity. He attended Mass every day. Not because I required it. I did not. Not because a teacher or priest imposed it. Because he wanted to. Because, as he explained to me with a logical simplicity, I found difficult to counter. Jesus is really there, Mama, in the host. If he is really there, why would I not go? I had no answer that held up. So I started going too. Slowly, infrequently at first, then more regularly, until the rhythm of it became natural, and the absence of it felt like a genuine loss. My son had led me back to something I had drifted away from, without quite noticing the drifting. He did this the way he did most things, without announcing it, without any apparent awareness of the significance of what he was doing, simply by being what he was and allowing others to be drawn toward it. His project, the website, and traveling exhibition cataloging Eucharistic miracles from around the world, began when he was perhaps 11 or 12. He had encountered, through his passion for computing and his characteristic hunger for evidence, the documented cases in which the Eucharistic host had undergone physical transformations that science could not explain. Bleeding hosts, hosts that survived fire, hosts subjected to modern laboratory analysis, whose results pointed toward something that conventional biology could not account for. He cataloged them systematically, built a website, designed a traveling exhibition. He approached it as a researcher and a devotee simultaneously, with no sense that these were intention. "I am doing what Thomas asked for," he told me once, when I asked why this particular project had consumed so much of his energy. Thomas needed to see and touch. I am building something that lets people see. Faith is better than proof, but proof is a gift for people who need it first. He was 13, and he had thought about it more carefully than most adults I have encountered. In September of 2006, Carlo became ill. The speed of it was the thing that remained incomprehensible for a long time afterward. He had been healthy, genuinely, actively healthy, planning a pilgrimage with friends, playing sports, laughing at dinner, staying up too late playing video games and being told to sleep. And then, within a matter of days, the word leukemia entered our lives, and everything reorganized around it with a brutality that I was entirely unprepared for, despite believing in some abstract way that I understood that life was fragile. Fulminant leukemia. The word fulminant means sudden. It means overwhelming. It means that the disease proceeds with a force and a speed that leaves very little time for the processes of adjustment that people sometimes manage when the progression is slower. There was almost no time between diagnosis and the knowledge that it was terminal. Carlo was hospitalized at San Gerardo in Monza on October 3rd. He was 15 years old. He had offered his suffering for the Pope and for the Church, which I learned later and which, knowing Carlo, required no translation. It was exactly what he would do. It was consistent with every other choice he had made. What was not consistent with anything I had previously understood about dying was his demeanor. I do not mean that he was brave, in the ordinary sense. Managing fear through will, performing peace to protect the people around him, maintaining composure as a form of dignity under pressure. I mean something different. I mean that Carlo was genuinely unafraid, that there was no subtext of terror beneath his stillness, that the serenity was not surface. It went all the way down, to whatever the deepest place in a person is, and it was real there. He spoke to us, to me, to Andrea, to the friends and priests who visited, with a quality of attention and presence that seemed to increase as his physical condition deteriorated, as though the energy that his body could no longer sustain was being redistributed somewhere else, as though the process of dying was, for him, a process of becoming more concentrated, in some essential sense, more himself, more present, more completely oriented toward what he was oriented toward. I watched this and did not know what to do with it. I was his mother. I was watching my 15-year-old son die. The love and the horror of that experience cannot be adequately communicated, and I will not try. But alongside the love and the horror was something else, something that grew stronger in me as the days passed and that I eventually recognized as wonder. A bewildered, inadequate, real wonder at what I was witnessing, at who Carlo was being in the face of what was happening to him. On the afternoon of October 8th, 5 days after his admission, 4 days before his death, he called me to his bedside. And if this channel has been an answer for you, consider leaving a super thanks. This financial help, however small it may seem, sustains this mission and allows us to continue bringing deep and transformative content to more lives that need this word. He was wearing his glasses. He was holding a small image of Our Lady, a card, laminated, the kind sold at sanctuary gift shops that has no particular monetary value, and that a 15-year-old boy in a hospital bed was holding as carefully as if it were made of something that could break. I had been organizing his things on the small table beside the bed, the practical, purposeful tidying that hands do when they are trying to manage what the heart cannot manage. He said my name. "Mama, sit here. I need to explain something to you." I sat. I took his hand. His hand was warm. This surprised me sometimes. How warm his hands remained when everything else seemed to be withdrawing from the surface of things. "I need to explain something about what is happening to me," he said. "Not the medical part, the other part. Jesus showed me how to explain it, because he said there are people who need to understand it, and you are the one who is going to tell them. I want to be honest about my interior state in that moment. I was his mother, and he was dying, and part of me was resistant to anything that felt like a framework, resistant to having his dying organized into a lesson, however loving the intention. I wanted to be present to him without purpose. I wanted there to be no agenda, no mission, no function to the remaining hours. Just him. Just us. But I looked at his face, and what I saw there was not a boy with an agenda. It was a boy with something to give away before he left, and the giving mattered to him. So I let go of my resistance, and I listened. People are afraid of dying, Carlo said, because they think the soul is torn away from the body, like something being ripped, a separation that is violent and sudden and final. He paused. It isn't like that. Jesus showed me that it isn't like that at all. What is it like? I asked. It is like a child who has been playing inside a house for a very long time, Carlo said, and who suddenly hears, through the window, the voice of someone calling from the garden. Not a stranger's voice. A voice the child knows. The way a child knows its mother's voice before it understands what voices are, completely in the bones. He looked at me directly. The soul doesn't panic when it hears the voice, he said. It recognizes it. That's the word. Recognition. Not encounter. Not confrontation. Recognition. The soul says, that is the voice I have always known. That is the voice I was made to hear. And it turns toward the window, not in fear, but in the way you turn toward something you have been waiting for, without knowing you were waiting. I said nothing. I was afraid that if I spoke, I would interrupt something that needed to arrive complete. 3 days ago, Carlo continued, meaning October 5th, 2 days after his admission. I felt my soul begin to wake up in a new way. Not waking from sleep, waking from something deeper than sleep, like a part of me that had been very quiet for 15 years suddenly becoming active, becoming louder, clearer, more real than the rest of me. What did it feel like? I asked. He considered. Carlo was always careful about words, precise, unwilling to use approximations when accuracy was available. You know how sometimes you hear a piece of music that you have not heard since childhood? And the music arrives and something in you that you did not know was there, responds to it, responds before your mind has identified the song, before you have consciously remembered anything. Something in you simply knows the music and moves toward it. Yes, I said, it is like that. The soul hears something, not with ears, with everything. And it responds from a depth that is below thought, below memory, below anything that can be explained in ordinary terms. It responds from the level where it was made. And the response is not fear. The response is recognition. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he continued. And then, the memories begin to return. What memories? The memories from before, Carlo said, with a simplicity that made the phrase feel completely natural, rather than mystical. The soul begins to remember what it was before it was born, before it came here. Not images or events, feelings. The feeling of being with God, the feeling of what it was like before the heaviness of the body, before the weight of time, before the distances that are everywhere in this life, between people, between moments, between what we want and what we have. He paused again. Mama, have you ever come home after a very long journey? Not a vacation, a real journey, months away, and walked through the door of your house and the smell of it reached you, the specific smell that only your home has, that you stopped noticing years ago because you were always there, but that you recognize instantly the moment you've been away long enough to lose it. Yes, I said, and I felt, saying it, that I knew exactly what he was going to say next. The soul, when it is preparing to leave, smells home, Carlo said. Not metaphorically. Actually, something reaches the soul, a quality, a presence, a particular way of being held, that it recognizes from before it was born. And it says, I know this. I have been here before. I am going back. He smiled. the smile that I knew better than any other expression in the world. Gentle, certain, with a quality of warmth that had nothing performed in it. "When that recognition happens," he said, "the soul does not grieve for the life it is leaving. It feels something more like homesickness, but homesickness for the place it is going, not the place it is leaving. Longing, anticipation, the specific ache of almost being somewhere you deeply love." I was weeping quietly by this point, not in distress. The weeping was something else, some response to being in proximity to something true. "The body gets harder," Carlo said. "Each breath is more work. Each hour requires more from what remains. But here is what people do not understand, Mama. What people watching from outside cannot see. While the body is getting heavier, the soul is getting lighter. Every hour that is difficult for the body is an hour in which something lifts from the soul, as though the weight of the world were being removed, layer by layer, gently, without violence." He shifted slightly on his pillow. "Yesterday," he said, meaning October 7th, I felt that more than half of me was already somewhere else. Not gone, present, but present in a different place. A place that felt more real than this room, more vivid, more itself. Like the difference between a photograph of a garden and standing in the garden. "And today?" I asked. "Today only a very thin thread connects me to here," he said. "I can feel the thread. It is not painful. It is simply thin. And on the other side of it, everything is waiting. Not in a frightening way, in the way that home waits. Patient, lit, completely certain that you are coming." He looked at me with an expression I will carry for the rest of my life. There was no tragedy in it. There was love, and there was peace, and there was something I can only call readiness, not resignation. Not the resigned acceptance of someone who has given up. The readiness of someone who has finished one thing and is about to begin the next, and is grateful for both. "Tell people this," Carlo said. "When someone they love is dying, and they watch the face change and the breathing change, and they are afraid of what they are witnessing, tell them what is happening underneath. Tell them that the soul is not being torn away. It is being called home. Tell them that the difficulty they see on the surface is the weight of the world being lifted, not the soul being destroyed. Tell them that the recognition on the dying person's face, the moments when they seem to see something others cannot see, when they smile at something invisible, when they whisper to presences that are not visible in the room. Tell them that is real. That is the soul seeing what the body cannot yet see. That is someone standing at the threshold of a house they remember from before they had any memories, and finding it exactly as beautiful as it always was." He squeezed my hand. "I am not afraid, Mama," he said. "I am almost home." In the 3 days that followed that conversation, I watched Carlo live exactly what he had described. His face became, progressively, more luminous. His breathing was more difficult. The nurses were present more frequently, the medication increasing. But his expression was serene in a way that seemed entirely independent of his physical condition, as though occupying a different register altogether. He smiled at things I could not see. He whispered names I did not always recognize. He held my hand, and Antonia's hand, and the hands of the priests who came. And in each grip, there was something that felt less like farewell and more like assurance. Less, "I am leaving," and more, "You will be all right." On October 12th, 2006, at 6:42 in the morning, Carlo entered his final passage. I was beside him. His last words, spoken clearly with a quality of wonder in his voice that I have heard described, by people who have read the account of those who were present, as unmistakable, were, Mama, it is so beautiful. It is exactly as I remembered. He had remembered. The soul had remembered home. And at 6:45 in the morning, still wearing the expression of someone arriving somewhere they deeply love, he left. The thread had become a bridge, and he had crossed it. For 18 years I held what Carlo told me on October 8th as the most intimate and the most sacred possession of my grief. Not because it was secret, Carlo had asked me to share it, but because grief has its own timetable, and the timetable for this particular telling was longer than I had expected. In the immediate years after his death, I was rebuilding. The church had opened the cause for his beatification relatively quickly, the process that would eventually, in 2020, bring us to Assisi for the ceremony, and in 2025, bring us to Rome for the canonization. And my life became organized around that process in ways I had not anticipated. Testimonies, documentation, the careful work of presenting a life to ecclesiastical scrutiny. I spoke widely about Carlo during those years, about his faith, his programming, his daily Mass, his joy, his approach to his own dying. But not about October 8th, not about the conversation at the bedside, not about what he had said about the soul's recognition, the return of celestial memory, the thread becoming a bridge. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment. In retrospect, I think I was waiting for the right person, for evidence that the telling would land where it was meant to land, that the words would reach the people Carlo had said they were for. That evidence arrived on October 12th, 2024, 18 years to the day. A letter reached me through the network of families and caregivers that had formed around Carlo's cause. It was from a woman named Teresa Gonçalves, a mother in Brazil. Her daughter, 8 years old, named Clara, had been diagnosed with terminal cancer. The prognosis gave Clara weeks, perhaps less. Teresa wrote with the particular exhaustion of someone who has been strong for a very long time and is at the edge of what strength can do. She wrote that she was not afraid for Clara's soul. She believed she had faith, she held it. But she was afraid of the dying itself, of watching her daughter's small body endure what it would have to endure, of being present to the changes in Clara's face and breath and consciousness without knowing how to interpret them, of whether what she would witness would be suffering or something else, of whether the fear she saw sometimes in Clara's eyes was the fear of death or simply the ordinary fear of a child in pain. She had found, through Clara's palliative care chaplain, the story of Carlo Acutis. Clara had become attached to it, to him specifically, to the boy who had faced the same diagnosis with serenity she could not account for, and who had died saying the thing was beautiful. Clara had asked her mother whether she thought it would be beautiful for her too. Teresa wrote, "I did not know what to say to my daughter. I did not know how to answer her question truthfully, without lying to her. I am writing to you because you are the only person I can think of who might know how to answer it." I read the letter 3 times, and then I wrote back. I wrote back with everything Carlo had told me on October 8th, 2006. The child hearing the mother's voice from the garden, the soul waking to music it has always known, the returning memory of home, the lightness growing as the heaviness increases, the thread becoming a bridge. I wrote it as carefully as I could, not embellished, not simplified, as close to Carlo's own words as 18 years of carrying them had kept them. Teresa's response came 11 days later. She wrote that she had read Carlo's words to Clara, that Clara had listened with the complete attention that children sometimes give to things that matter to them deeply. that when Teresa finished reading, Clara had been quiet for a long time, and then had asked, "Mama, do you think I will recognize the voice when it calls me?" Teresa had said yes. She believed yes. Clara had nodded with the particular nod of a child who has just received information that resolves something. Then she had asked, not anxiously, but with the practical curiosity of someone doing reasonable planning, whether she thought the angels would understand Portuguese, or whether she should try to learn some of the prayers in other languages. Teresa wrote, "She has not had a nightmare since then. She asks me sometimes whether I think she will see Carlo there, and I tell her I think it is very possible. She seems to find this satisfying. She has stopped being afraid of sleeping." Clara died 3 weeks after that letter. Teresa wrote to me one more time, briefly, to tell me. She wrote that, in the last hours, Clara's face had held exactly the expression Carlo had described. Not pain, not fear, but something that Teresa could only describe as concentrated recognition, as if her daughter were listening very carefully to something beautiful, as if she were hearing a voice she had always known. Teresa wrote, "She recognized it. I watched her recognize it." I put down that letter and sat in silence for a long time. And I understood what Carlo had built 18 years earlier in a hospital room in Monza, in the same systematic way he had built everything, with structure, with precision, with the specific needs of specific people in mind. Not a single large document, a working tool, something a mother could read to her dying daughter and have it land in the exact place it was designed to reach. He had thought about Clara before Clara existed. He had thought about Teresa. He had thought about the hundreds of Teresas and Claras whose names I would never know, and who would need, in the worst hours of their lives, a framework for the thing they were witnessing that allowed them to interpret it as something other than horror. In the months that followed, as Carlo's canonization approached and my own speaking about him became more public and more wide-ranging, I began including his teaching about the soul's departure. Each time, the response confirmed what Teresa had experienced. A hospice physician in the United States who wrote that the framework had changed the way she spoke to families in the final hours. A priest in the Philippines who had incorporated it into his pastoral care for terminal patients. A father in Italy who had watched his wife of 40 years die, and who wrote to say that what he had been interpreting as her distress in those last hours, he now understood as something else entirely, and that the reinterpretation had lifted from him a weight of guilt and grief that he had been carrying for 2 years. Dr. Luis Mendoza, a pediatric oncologist in Buenos Aires who works with dying children and their families, wrote to me after one of my public talks. He had lost 15 children in a single month, a clustering of cases that had pushed him to the edge of his capacity to continue. He wrote, "For 25 years I have been using clinical language to describe what I see in my patients in the final passage. The language was accurate and it was inadequate. What your son described, the recognition, the return of something the soul carries from before birth, the increasing lightness beneath the increasing physical difficulty. This is what I have been witnessing and not knowing how to name. I have changed the way I speak to families. The change is not cosmetic. It reaches the places that clinical language cannot reach." He ended his letter with a sentence that I have returned to many times. Carlo catalogued the evidence of God in the Eucharist while he was alive. It seems that he catalogued the evidence of God in the dying while he was dying. In both cases, the methodology was the same: careful observation, precise documentation, and an absolute conviction that what he was looking at deserved to be communicated accurately to the people who needed it. That is exactly right. That is exactly Carlo. The methodology was the same because the person was the same. Whether he was 15 years old at a computer building a database of miracles, or 15 years old in a hospital bed describing the interior landscape of a soul preparing to go home. He observed precisely. He documented carefully. He thought about the people who would need the information and organized it so they could receive it. My name is Antonia Salzano. I am 54 years old. I am the mother of a saint, born May 3rd, 1991, in London. Died October 12th, 2006, in Milan at 15 years old. Beatified October 10th, 2020, in Assisi. Canonized in September of 2025, in Rome. In all the things I have said publicly about Carlo over these 18 years, the words I have protected most carefully are the ones he gave me on October 8th, 2006, 4 days before he died, in the gold of a late afternoon hospital room, while he held an image of Our Lady in his warm hands and told me what the soul feels when it hears the voice it has always known, calling from the garden. I am giving them to you now, because he asked me to, because there are people, perhaps you are one of them, who are watching someone they love prepare to leave, and who are interpreting what they see as suffering when it is something else, because there are people who are facing their own dying with terror that does not need to be terror, because there are children like Clara who deserve to know, when they ask whether it will be beautiful, that the answer is yes. The soul does not flee the body. It is called home. The dying are not losing something. They are recognizing something. The voice comes. The soul knows it. The thread becomes a bridge. And what waits on the other side, Carlo told me, and Clara confirmed it, is exactly as beautiful as the soul always remembered it was. And if this channel has been an answer for you, consider leaving a super thanks. This financial help, however small it may seem, sustains this mission and allows us to continue bringing deep and transformative content to more lives that need this word.